Welcome, everyone. Please go ahead and drop into the chat where you're coming in from today. Hi, Sylvia.
Hi.
See you again.
How are you, Carrie? Hi, Gabriella.
Hello, nice to meet you. Everyone else also, hello.
Hi.
Hello.
Anastasia.
Oh, lovely. Very nice. Okay.
Great to see everyone.
Yep.
We've still got people dropping in. We'll get started in just a second.
Excellent.
Thank you to everyone for dropping your location into the chat. You all know this is our favorite part. Well, this is one of my favorite parts of ILCA, is seeing where everybody joins from all over the world. How many continents we have represented. I see Judy coming in. Hello.
That's Ukraine heading the team now at the moment. Yep.
Hello. We've got friends.
Lots of people I know, lovely, and a few new faces, so that's very nice to know. Okay, wonderful.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, we've got, can Gabriella, can I hand off the admitting people to you? Yeah, you got that? Okay. Oh, we got someone else there.
Yep, good.
Yay. Wow, we've still got a lot of people coming in. Cool. Okay, thank you for listing where you're from in the chat, and welcome to this exciting event today. We are really thrilled to delve into this subject a little bit deeper and to introduce Carolyn to you and to watch and learn ourselves as well. My name is Carrie McKinnon. I'm the co-founder of the International Language Coaching Association. We run these live events, free live events, kind of public awareness building and training on all things that are relevant to language coaching and communication across cultures and everything that impacts the work that we do and the lives that we lead. So I will get to our speaker in just a moment. I would like to mention our field program. Whoops. There we go. Yeah, our field program here, which is the ILCA Language Coaching Certification Program. And our next start is in November. We just started with a new cohort, and I'm in a very connected space to this program, coming off of our second live session for the new cohort, and just the beautiful witnessing of the transformation that is happening from teacher to coach, the upskilling that's going on, the conversations that we're having about unlearning certain, advice giving, for example. That was one we had today that was just right on, as well as sharing learner responsibility and all the other parts of becoming a language coach. So please check that out. All the information is on our website, which, by the way, from the last time I've seen some of you at the conference, our new website is in full swing. It's ilkaglobal.com. Go there, it's updated. It's our new home on the internet. So thank you for allowing me that time, Carolyn. I'm going to stop sharing and allow you to get yourself situated with the sharing while I introduce you. Okay, so we've got a real, whoops, okay. Are you good, Carolyn? Yeah? Okay, you can go ahead and, yeah, there you go, great. All right, we've got a real treat for today with Carolyn. One second. Sorry, my computer just kind of blinked out on me. No.
Good. Can we see Carolyn?
There we go. Okay, we've got a treat today. Excuse me, with Carolyn Zeitler. We've got her screen up, yeah? Zeitler, I'm sorry. Okay. A dedicated advocate for purpose-driven entrepreneurship and social sustainability, Carolyn focuses on creating engaging and inspiring work environments, fostering collaboration, and building trust-based leadership. and she is all about making work smoother and more efficient. Her extensive experience spans nearly 2 decades of executive coaching, impacting over 3,000 clients worldwide. She's a serial entrepreneur that's founded 3 successful businesses. In Qatar, she's founded a transformative women's empowerment initiative. Very important work. Her expertise includes coaching on sustainable leadership, promoting purpose and social sustainability, unleashing individual organizational potential, business modeling, mastermind facilitation, storytelling, workshop leadership, and crafting company culture codes. So welcome, Carolyn. Thank you so much for doing this with us today. I am now going to completely hand this over to you.
Thank you so much. Thanks for the warm welcome. I'm not able to resume the share. I've tried to click it, but it's not letting me.
Maybe stop it and try again.
Okay.
Did work before, as we know.
Yeah.
Let's try it again. How's that? No, still not working.
Saying it started.
Yeah, it's started screen sharing.
You can see it?
Connection issue?
I think I'm fine. I can hear everyone, see everyone. There's no freezing. So I think my
If you'd like to send me your slides, I can share for you. Last, worst case scenario or whatever.
Okay.
Hello from Paris. Great.
Yeah, we've got a very multicultural group, actually.
Yeah. Well, Carolyn and I get that going. Gabriella, do you want to talk about anything? How about the next conference?
The next conference. Oh, yeah. Okay. I can talk about that for a very long time. So can I make the big announcement now?
Yeah, go for it.
Oh, okay. Woohoo. Okay. So the great news is that after London, after Paris, our next conference for the International Language Coaching Conference, which you may have heard of, we've done quite a lot of social media posting the past 2 years, is going to be in Budapest, which is my hometown. And I think that's great news because it's in a different part of Europe. So some of you mentioned that you can't join because you're not traveling that far. So this is more local. Hopefully that will be very exciting for everyone. We've got fantastic topics. I already know 1 or 2 of the speakers that are going to be talking. It's going to be really, really exciting. And we're going to be sharing all the information shortly over the next few weeks. So that's going to happen soon. So just keep your eyes peeled for that. I'm asking in the meantime whether we have the slides or not.
No.
See? No, not yet. All right. Okay.
Carolyn, are you sending them?
I've sent them to you. They should be in your inbox now.
Okay.
I have tried again to resume sharing, but for some reason it's just not letting me.
Okay.
Yeah, when I started talking, my computer just completely blinked out. Not completely, but like all my windows blinked out on me.
Okay.
Okay, we'll see. Okay, in the meantime, I'm just going to drop a question in the chat box. And if anyone would like to share either face-to-face, with your camera on or just in the chat. Okay, the question is, what has brought you here? What aspect of cross-cultural communication and coaching are you interested in? Okay.
Okay. Getting them. All right, I've got them.
Got them? Okay.
Yeah.
We'll be sharing in a minute. In the meantime, if there's anything you'd like to share, then do go on ahead. Either type into the chat.
I'm just going to download them so we're comfortable here.
Okay, so if there's anything you'd like to share, Lena's joining now. All right, okay. Oh, we've got 25. Wonderful. Sweet.
Okay, ready to share.
Very nice. Okay.
I'm still trying, but no, it's still not letting me. Sorry.
No, it's okay. It's okay. Okay, so in the meantime, I'm looking at the chat box while we set up. 3 coaches, 3 continents, 3 completely different cultures. So that's going to be an interesting one. we'll see how we come up with some fresh ideas, fresh perspectives. Okay, so we've got the slides. Excellent. Thank you, everyone, for your patience.
And that is how to troubleshoot in front of a live audience.
Good. Thank you.
All right. So, yes, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for having me today. I'm really looking forward to doing this session with you. So I've lived in a lot of different places and worked in a lot of different places. And so I've kind of noticed that, you know, people used to say about cross-cultural communication, you had to learn about the other culture and then sort of adapt to them, you know? So it would be like, okay, there's an American speaking to a Japanese. So what do you have to know about the Japanese culture to facilitate that communication? But nowadays that doesn't really work anymore because people might have been born in Japan and then gone to uni in the States and then worked for a while in India or in Dubai, and then, you know, so the cultures are not as clear cut anymore as they used to be. And so what I have kind of developed over the years is a kind of cross-cultural communication that works across all cultures. So just creating some awareness around what is culture about and what are the things, what is communication about, and what are the things we need to think about when we want to communicate with people who have different cultures. So can I have the next slide, please? Yeah. So differences are mostly superficial, and each of us thinks of anyone who's different from us in the first instance as strange, right? But then what I found is that really the differences are a very thin layer, and most of it underneath is our common humanity. So as soon as I talk to someone in a bit more depth, I realize that we have a lot more in common than what separates us. And that, you know, all of us have goals and dreams that we want to realize. All of us want our kids to have a better life than we had, you know, things like that. We just maybe have different ideas about how that can be done depending on our culture. Next slide, please. Okay, so the communication is always key. In order to understand each other, we have to communicate. But again, communication has so many meanings now, and especially now with social media and the apps that we have, it's become so normal to just speak to each other in text messages. But especially when we want to create some depth and some connection, and when we want to maybe see an emotional part to, you know, make an emotional connection or have a more difficult conversation, text messages really don't work. No, we need to at least be in a video call, or ideally in person if we can. All right, next slide, please. So multicultural environments come in very different forms. So the pictures you see here are from some of my courses and conferences that I've done, but the actual, you know, culture nowadays, culture has actually a much broader meaning than just someone who's from a different ethnicity or from a different country. We have a culture in every family. Every family has its own culture in a way, right? Every family has certain habits and things that they do together that is normal and accepted in that family, but outside of that family might seem strange. Every school has a culture, every university has a culture. So we are actually always in multicultural environments because we're always surrounded by people who have grown up with different norms from our norms. Next slide, please. So there's Hofstede is a very famous researcher who did a lot of research on cultural differences, and here are some of the examples of some of the dimensions that he defined. So I think we can all recognize things like high power distance and low power distance, right? There are certain cultures, I'm sure we've all interacted with certain cultures where there's a high power distance, meaning that if someone is my superior, in the chain of command, wherever I am. Let's say in the army, there's usually a very high power distance, right? So if in the army I have a superior, then I have to speak to that superior with respect, and I have to speak to them in a very formal way. Whereas in a low power distance, say in a startup, for example, if someone's the CEO and I'm an employee, I can speak to them like I can speak to a friend or something, right? So it goes from the high power distance is one extreme to the low power distance is the other extreme. But obviously a lot of things are in the middle somewhere. Or the individualism, collectivism, right? I think we, again, that's something very familiar, that in some cultures, like what we call the global north, yeah, it's more about the individual. It's more about, I have my goals and I'm gonna strive for my goals, and I come first and then I connect with everyone else. As opposed to the collectivist cultures where the collective, the community, always comes first, and I, as an individual, have to take a step back. I'm not the most important person, right? The collective comes first, and then if I can fulfill my individual needs after I've met the needs of the collective, then I can do that. So these are just some examples. Can we go to the next? The one that I think is most important for us now is the communication dimension. So we have high context and low context cultures. So in high context cultures, you usually have a lot of communication. So people are more likely to call each other several times a day, call each other for just anything, just pick up the phone and call each other. And there's a lot more context, right? You use the body language more, you have all other parts of communication, whereas in an extremely low context environment, it's very much about the words, and it's very blunt often and direct. Yeah, so you have if you think of a lot of Asian countries have very high context, right? So you don't speak bluntly. You don't just say what you mean. You kind of imply what you mean, and the other person has to kind of read between the lines. Yeah. And in Germany, for example, it's a very low context culture. So in Germany, people feel free to be very direct and just say exactly what they think. They don't beat around the bush, right? So these are sort of the extremes. And as I say, you don't find the kind of really pure forms of things, of these kind of stereotypes that much anymore, because people now have mixed so much with other cultures that, it's not always that pure, but you can still see the tendencies, I think. You can still see the tendencies for the higher context and lower context. Like I'm in Africa right now, in Zanzibar, and here it's like, you can call someone 3 times in a day, it's no problem. And there are some countries where if you call someone 3 times in a day, they'd bite your head off, right? So it's a very different kind of context, yeah? And so some things work and some things don't. All right, let's go. All right, so the 5 steps to a more connective kind of intercultural communication are to be patient, assume good attention, be attentive, dare to ask and clarify, and ensure understanding. And we'll look at each of them in more detail now. So let's go to the next slide. So be patient. Yeah, being patient. And can we go to the next slide? Actually, this one is just for fun. Then being patient. So what I mean by being patient, one part of being patient is going to the balcony, as William Ury calls it. I used to call it activating my neutral observer, but I feel that people can relate more to this expression of going to the balcony. So sometimes, we are in a situation where we're communicating and it's a little bit challenging. And maybe the person is speaking to us in a way that we perceive as rude. And maybe they're raising their voice, or maybe their language skills are not so great, or whatever. And we're feeling triggered by that. Yeah, we're feeling maybe frustrated by that. We're getting impatient. So the idea of going to the balcony is that we go to a place that is sort of as if we're standing on the ground, and we put a part of ourselves up on a balcony looking at the conversation from above. So if we're looking at the conversation from above and we see what's happening as an outsider from the conversation, right? If we have that outside perspective, then we can think about what actually serves the greater good best in this situation. If I get triggered, if I get annoyed, if I get angry, is that really gonna drive my interest and the conversation forward? Probably not, right? So how can I stay calm, and how can I go forward with this conversation? So that's something that William Ury calls going to the balcony. Yeah. So I feel that it's a very nice image to have, where you go to the balcony and you look down at yourself and someone else having a conversation, and you think, what would serve these two people best? What would serve the conversation best at this moment, right? So, and then assume good intention, or at the very least, assume the absence of bad intention. Yeah. So we usually have, like, people usually have good intentions. They come, they speak to you in a certain way, or they want something from you. They come to you with a good intention, and it's not always easy, or it's not always immediately obvious what the intention is, because people have very different ways of speaking, have different ways of approaching things. So sometimes we might feel that somebody is being rude, or they're trying to take advantage of us or something, when actually they are doing something completely different. So our first assumption should always be one of a good intention. So I often compare that to when your child or your little sister or someone that you really love, someone that you love dearly, does something that could be construed as mean or horrible. You don't think of them as a mean person, right? You don't immediately think, oh, what a mean person. No, you look at them and you think, I wonder what made them do this, right? I wonder how they came up with this. Like, how did that come into their head that they could say something like that or do something like that? So that is what I'm asking you to do with everyone. Assume that they're a good person unless they've proven otherwise to you, assume that they're trying to connect, they're trying to have a good conversation with you, and look at it from that perspective, and you will see very different possibilities. As if you look at things from the possible positive perspective. All right. Next slide, please. By the way, we do have time for questions. You can either note them down for the end of the session, or you can ask them in between. It's fine either way. You would have to raise your hand electronically, please, for me to see it, because I can't see otherwise. All right. Then being attentive. Being attentive is like kind of an extension of the previous point. It's like really paying attention to what the person is saying in all the aspects of it, because as we know, like, the words that somebody uses are a very small part of what is actually being said, right? So if I'm there with the person, if I'm really present with the person, I'm really trying to understand them, I will have a much better chance. It also means don't be distracted. Nowadays, we have so many distractions, but we really want to be present with the person. We want to be fully present with them in the communication, so that we get what's really going on all the levels, on all the many levels that we communicate. Because we have the body language, we have the facial expression, and when we're actually in the room together, we have so many more signals that happen on a very, very, subconscious level, but they still happen. So being attentive is really important, and not being distracted and on the phone and thinking about other things, but actually being present with the person with all your attention. Because nowadays, honestly, our attention is the biggest gift that we can give anyone, because everyone is fighting for it. So many parties are fighting for our attention, and it's a big gift to give it to someone. Right. Next one, please. So dare to ask and to clarify, right? If you're not sure about something, and a lot of the time we're not sure about something, it's really, really important to understand how often we make assumptions about things. Yeah. So go back to what you actually observe and then check whether your interpretation of that was right or not. Right? Like if I do this, somebody might interpret it as I'm raising my hand, I'm trying to get your attention. Somebody else might interpret it as I'm trying to hit them, or, you know, like there are many ways that this could be interpreted depending on your backstory, on your previous experiences, on your expectations. So if I'm doing this, then all I'm doing is raising my hand. That's the only thing you can say for sure. She raised her hand. Everything beyond she raised her hand is interpretation on your part, right? So check your interpretations, check your assumptions that arise from those, and ask, clarify. Yeah. I saw you raise your hand. What were you trying to achieve by that? Yeah, something like that. Just ask a clarifying question, and especially across cultures, because you know, when people come from a very different context, they often use very different gestures for things, right? Like I remember, you know, I grew up in Europe, and in Europe, this is something that Italians do, right? And Italians are, when they do this, they are expressing annoyance or impatience, right? So when you see that, you kind of feel like, okay, I've done something wrong. I've annoyed someone, right? However, when I moved to the Middle East, I found out that in the Middle East, this means, please give me a moment. It's a very completely different meaning, right? So in the Middle East, if they do that, they say, please give me a moment, please wait, and please be patient, right? So completely different meaning. So it's very interesting, you know, and that's why it's so important that we dare to ask and that we dare to clarify, because it's so easy to make assumptions about things that we're not aware of. Right, next one, please. And then the last one, ensure understanding. So it's a little known fact that, you know, in cultures, we have something called tacit agreements. So if you grow up in a certain culture, then you are used to doing things a certain way. There are rules in that culture that nobody ever speaks, but that everyone knows. And they're kind of transmitted just by behaviors and by, you know, all kinds of things, but never actually spoken. Most people are not aware of them. But one of those tacit agreements is, in some cultures, when I speak to you, it is my responsibility to make sure that you understand. In other cultures, when I speak to you, it is your responsibility to make sure that you understand. Okay? So you can imagine when the wrong two people get together, neither of them ever checks understanding, and then understanding might never happen in this context, right? So for this reason, try to always ensure understanding. Try to always take the responsibility to ensure that you are understanding and that you are understood, because you don't know what the other person's tacit agreement is in the way that they grew up in their culture, right? So make sure that you understand and that you are understood, because so many times we just sort of move on quickly because we don't want to look stupid, or we don't want to ask too many questions, or we don't want to be a bother to someone. And then it just has horrendous effects, especially in the workplace. You know, you might go for like 2 weeks on the assumption that you've understood something, and you're taking a path accordingly, you're doing work accordingly. And then only 2 weeks later, it transpires that that wasn't actually what was asked of you, for example, right? So it's a lot of time and a lot of energy can be wasted if we don't ensure understanding. We need to be very clear. So how do we ensure understanding? Again, we ask questions, we ask people to repeat. Just saying, have you understood, is not good enough because people mostly say yes. So mostly when I ask someone, yeah, did you understand that? They will just nod their head or say yes, even though they might not have understood completely. So if it's really important in any situation where it's important that you are sure that the person understood, get them to repeat back to you in their own words. Yeah, so that is really the only way, and offer them the same thing. So whatever they said, you just repeat it back to them, and you go, so did I get it correctly that you said da 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 da, and you say it in your own words, and then you can be sure that you've actually made a connection there and that you've understood. All right. So this was just for. Sorry. We have another. I have another presentation for the nonviolent communication.
Okay, yep, let me pull that up in just a second. In the meantime, I see some comments coming in.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'll get the other one. One second.
What have we got here?
Okay, can you see the notes there? The comments?
In the chat?
Yeah.
I can see the chat, yeah.
Right. Is there anything that you can address based on this as we transition into the other one?
Oh, how can the system communicate in international settings and run? Yeah. I think with students, it's really, I think that's a good question, how you can assist students, because I feel, the less experience you have of communicating between cultures, the more difficult it is, because you haven't yet understood what your own culture's assumptions are. Once you've left your home country more often, once you've traveled a bit more, you get a much better perspective on what your own culture's assumptions are. But as long as you've been mostly in one culture, you have that thing like fish in water, right? Like a fish doesn't recognize water because they always live in water. So they don't know the special qualities of water. And so we often have the same with our culture, that we've always lived in that culture. So we are not aware of what are the things that are different from other cultures, and until we actually encounter other cultures. Often some things really just, you only realize when you've actually left the country, and then you sort of look back and you think, oh, that is something that we do in our country, and other people don't do that, Like a small example, I grew up in Germany, and in Germany, people constantly talk about drafts. It's something that I've never experienced anywhere else in the world. But in Germany, you have conversations about drafts all the time, like somewhere there's a window open or there's an AC on, and someone will ask, can I close the window or can I turn the AC off because there's a draft, And only when I left Germany, I realized that in other countries, people never talk that much about drafts, but it's such a common topic. So you have these kind of little things, but then you also have bigger things, that are really something you don't realize. Also, the other thing that I realized is that and nothing ever applies to everyone, of course, in a country. It's always just tendencies, but another tendency that German people have is that they often know the price of everything they own exactly. And you ask them about them, or you pay them a compliment on a piece of clothing, and they're like, yeah, that was 30 euros in the sale. Like, okay. So you have these kind of cultural things that often apply to one culture much more than others, So, yeah. Oh, that's interesting that the drafts are a topic in France too. I guess they're neighbors, the German and the French, so they might share some of these topics. All right. So the other thing that we really wanted to look into today is the basics of nonviolent communication, because whenever I speak about communication, I really like to highlight this wonderful method that was invented by Dr. Marshall Rosenberg. Can we go to the next slide? So Dr. Marshall Rosenberg was a psychologist and an international mediator, and he made a very significant contribution to world peace by mediating between warring parties and things like that. But during his lifetime, what he felt was that the peace could only really prevail if every household lived in peace. That peace had to start at home. So the older he got, the more he actually focused on creating peace in the individual households. And so he created this method called nonviolent communication, which is all about communicating in a way where we're not violent with each other. So if we can go to the next slide, then so the purpose of nonviolent communication is to connect in a way that makes natural giving possible. And natural giving is giving from the heart. It's joyful giving. So natural giving is something that maybe people find a bit hard to understand sometimes, but what it means is I give because I want to give. I give because actually it's a joy to give if I'm giving the thing that I love giving. And I don't expect anything in return. Natural giving does not mean I'm tallying up my giving in the back of my head, like we often do, right? When we give something and then in the back of our head, we're like, okay, now this person owes me. When it's natural giving, that person doesn't owe you. Yeah, when it's natural giving, it's about giving for the joy of giving. And because it's something we have to share and we love sharing it. All right, so this is what he defines as the purpose of nonviolent communication. All right, let's go. All right, this requires, obviously, it requires a vulnerability, and vulnerability always requires psychological safety. And as you can imagine, psychological safety cannot coexist with violence, right? If we want to feel psychologically hello? Okay. So if we want to be psychologically safe, we have to be in an environment where it's okay to speak up, where it's okay, where my feedback is received, and where I'm not made fun of or ridiculed or things like that, right? So all of these things, like ridiculing someone or not accepting their feedback, these are examples of violence. If we go to the next slide, we have more. Yeah, so blaming and shaming is an example of violence. Judgment, coercion, I am right, you are wrong. Not that you can never say I'm right, you are wrong, but this, this insistence and not listening, that kind of I am right, you are wrong is like a kind of violence, yeah? So nonviolent communication as a countermeasure to that has two parts, which are empathy and honesty. Right? So first of all, in order to create a psychologically safe environment, I need to speak with empathy. So I always need to be aware how that might affect the other person, right? It's very important to be honest, as you can see from the second point here, but that doesn't mean that because I'm honest, I'm going to be brutal. I don't have to be brutal to be honest, right? I can say something honestly without hurting the other person. It's not necessary to be hurtful in order to be honest, right? So if I look at it with empathy and honesty together, then I can be honest without being hurtful, right? And the four components of nonviolent communication are observation, feeling, need, and request. So as we said before, right, an observation is what it would be the same for everyone. So now we are, I don't know, 25 people here on this call. If I do something, if I do anything, and you know, I do like this, and after we ask like all the 25 people, like, what did I do? Many of you might have different interpretations of what that means, right? But what everyone can agree on is that I put my palm on my forehead, because that's an observation, right? So observation is the basic, without interpretation, without assumptions put into it. Observation is just what actually happens, what everyone in the room can agree on, because you can see it, you can hear it, you can observe it, right? Then the feeling is, how do I feel? And we'll go into that in a bit more detail in a minute. But like, what often happens is that people say, I feel that you are doing this and that. That's not talking about how I feel, right? That is talking about what I think or what I assume. And we just often mistakenly use the word feel for that, but it's not actually a feeling, all right? But luckily, nonviolent communication has a very nice feeling inventory and the needs inventory that will help us get clearer on what are feelings and what are needs. Okay, and then we want to drill down to the level of needs, because needs are universal, right? Needs, every person understands needs. Like, we have a need for security, we have a need for freedom, we have a need for I don't know, human connection, we have a need for recognition, for being seen, right? So needs, everyone can understand needs, but we might have different strategies for meeting these needs. And so if we bring it down to the level of needs, that's the level where we can understand each other. And then I can say, okay, this is my need. Now I want to tell you what I think is my best chance of fulfilling that need, right? And then we can make a request. It's very important that a request is not the same as a demand, right? So if my request, if my need is for a company, for example, for, you know, having human connection, then my request might be that you spend time with me, but I cannot pin that on you specifically. I can't say it can only be you, nobody else can help me with this need, right? Because first of all, it's not true. And secondly, then it becomes a demand and not a request. So let's go to the next slide. We go into this in a bit more detail so we can see what it means, okay? So the observation is the actual observable behavior, free of interpretation, assumptions, and feelings. I think that one is clear. And then feelings, right? As I say, I feel is often abused. I feel you are angry is an opinion or an assumption. It's not a statement of how I feel, right? And then you have like often thinly veiled accusations, like I feel abandoned, I feel cornered, I feel manipulated. I'm actually saying you are manipulating me, you are rejecting me, you are abusing me, you are attacking me, right? So that's again not really how I feel. I am actually accusing you of something by using this kind. So if we go to the next slide, that's why these are not feelings, right? These are not feelings, but the next slide, you will see the actual inventory of feelings. So these are actual feelings, right? So we have feelings that we have when our needs are met, and we have feelings that we have when our needs are unmet. So as you can see here, the first bit at the top are feelings that you might have when your needs are met. The second bit at the bottom are the feelings you might have when your needs are not met. These are not all the feelings. If you go to the feelings inventory, you will see like more feelings that, but that's why I put the link there. Okay, now next slide. And then we have needs. As I said before, all needs are universal to all humans. And that's how we can create understanding and connection. Everyone understands the need for laughter, for love, for meaning. Everyone understands the need for shelter, for trust, for understanding, for warmth. You know, we might be on different points in this on the spectrum, you know, like maybe I need a lot of freedom and another person needs a lot of security. The spectrum, there's a spectrum that goes from freedom to security or stability, right? And you know, one of us might be a bit further on that side of the spectrum, another person might be a bit further on that side of the spectrum, but still we both understand. We still understand, like, even though I have a very high need for freedom and not so high need for stability, I still understand the need for stability because I feel it at times, and vice versa, right? So that is where as humans, we can come together and we can create understanding. We want to drill down through all the superficial things that are happening on the surface to understand what is the underlying need that I'm trying to meet here. What is the, like, whenever we're sad, we're angry, we're disappointed, you know, chances are that we are reacting to an unmet need. And if we can identify that need, then we can work on meeting that need. Next slide, please. So as I said, requests are not demands. Requests enable natural giving and receiving, right? So I am just giving you an option. If I make a request of you, then I'm giving you an option of how you might help me meet my need. Because maybe I have a better idea of that than you, obviously, because it's my need, right? So, but I cannot demand it of you, right? I can give you a suggestion, and if you feel willing to follow that suggestion, then that's great. If you don't, then I will not be offended or, you know, angry with you or whatever, right? So go to the next one. Okay, so this is the basic model for nonviolent communication. When I see that you do such and such, or you speak to me in such and such way, or you behave in such and such a way, I feel because my need for is or is not met. Would you be willing to right? So we give, we explain ourselves, and then we make a request. The explaining yourself requires vulnerability, right? You have to be vulnerable in order to share with the person how you feel and what you needed, right? So I use the business example in the next slide just to see how that might look in a work environment. Now, tell me what is wrong with this example. When I see that you haven't completed the job, I feel ignored because my need for you following my instructions is not met. Would you be willing to be more attentive next time? What is wrong with this example? Anyone got any ideas? Please just unmute yourself and speak up.
I find it extremely negative, and there's no way for the person to sort of see what happened. Yeah. Maybe they didn't think they were ignoring you. I don't know. And would you be willing to be more attentive is a bit condescending.
Yeah. Oh. Yes. So yes, and thank you, and also thank you, Anastasia, in the chat. Yes, feel ignored is one of those accusations, right? So I'm actually accusing you of ignoring me. Yeah. And a need for following my instructions is not a real need, right? For you to follow my instructions, that's not a real human need that we share as human beings, right? So there is no need to be obeyed or need for someone to follow your instructions, right? So, and yes, be more attentive next time could be very easily received as being condescending. So let's have a look at the next slide where we're correcting these mistakes. Okay, so when I see that you haven't completed the job, because that is just a statement, right? The job is not completed. that is just a statement of fact. That's not a criticism. It's just, you haven't completed the job. I feel disheartened because my need for understanding and being understood is not met. That could be one example. There could be many, many other feelings here, right? But this person has the need for understanding and being understood that is not met in this particular example, right? Because maybe they've explained to the person that they're speaking to how very important it is that this job is completed on time, and now they're feeling that they weren't understood, right? So would you be willing to go over the job requirements with me again? Right, so that way you can see how this opens up much more of an opportunity for dialogue to happen, right? The previous example doesn't really allow the dialogue to happen because we're in confrontation, and when we're confronting someone in a confrontational way, they tend to go on the defensive, and as soon as we're on the defensive, we're like fighting our way out of our corner, right? We're not actually willing to have like vulnerable conversation anymore. But if we say it in a way like this, then we're opening up the floor, we're opening up the possibility for vulnerable conversation to happen. And that means that we can move forward and we can move through this situation. And note that there is no blame in this, right? There is no blame. The only thing that is mentioned is you haven't completed the job because that's a fact. There was a job to be completed and it's not completed, but there is no blame in it, right? Because that's very important. We want to look for a solution, not for blame. Okay? And that's it from this. These are just the resources that I use to put this presentation together. So now it's time for questions.
I'm so excited for us to get started with this discussion. It's got all my wheels turning, especially about family interactions.
Go ahead, please.
Communication between family members.
Well, that's actually what Dr. Marshall Rosenberg focuses on most, is the communication between couples. So when you watch his workshop, it's a lot about the communication between couples, because that's where a lot of the violent communication happens. Yeah, between couples and between parents and children, that's where a lot of violence happens inadvertently. No, just to be clear, like people don't mean to be violent, but they don't have a better model, so they don't know how to, how to communicate in a way that is not violent.
Well, okay, guys, we are open for questions. Why don't we do a raise your hand?
Comments or suggestions, whatever.
Okay, I see Julie Yoder's got her hand popping up.
Well, I just want to say thank you. This is so timely, and I might struggle to express myself because, like Carrie said, there's a lot of things going on in my head that are resonating with me. The reason it's timely is that in 2023, in my client work, these communication issues that we're getting requests to help with are kind of changing. And the best description I could give it is, so I'm speaking in the US and from a US perspective. I would say that we, until recently, had a culture of respect for expertise that seems to be eroding. And some of the situations that have been showing up more consistently are clients or even friends, anecdotally, who've been telling me about some of the things they've been dealing at work, who, they're in midlife, they have their graduate degree, they've been doing this type of work for years and years and years. And now they have colleagues or people that they're supposed to be training who think they know better. And so I would say it's like an erosion of, or a shift in the culture of respect for expertise. And so I was marking down the feelings inventory in particular, because I just yesterday in an intake, a client said to me, I need help navigating these situations. Like when we're in the medical exam room and I'm making a decision, he's actually a veterinarian, and I'm making a decision about what needs to happen with this animal. And the vet tech is very aggressive and pushes back and insists that she knows better. And I thought, wow, this same scenario has been playing out a lot in 2023. And so then the question becomes like, how do we meet this? What really resonated with me was like the description of this as like violent communication, right? Hey, I have 1 year of experience and I'm in training and you're the doctor, but I'm in charge here, like, where's that aggression coming from? And then I started thinking about all the different scenarios because I work with people across all these different fields. And, I only have my little anecdotal window into the world, but it's definitely been a theme in 2023. And so I guess, I just wanted to comment on that, but my question is, I know this is only an hour-long presentation, is the same question as the clients. How do when the cultural norm is changing, when you're entering into a profession, assuming that your trainees or whoever, your patients, whoever, respect your expertise and authority, but then they don't, and you're met with this aggressive, pushback inside your head, you're kind of like, why are you here? You're clearly not here to learn or to be helped, and they're all asking the non-native English speakers anyway, like, I don't have the language for how to navigate this professionally and get it to a good outcome.
Yeah. So I think we really need to approach, and this is challenging, I know, but I think it's really important to approach this with empathy and to think, where are these kids coming from? Like these young people, like, where are they coming from and what is pushing them to be so aggressive in this context? Yeah. And to try to understand what it is, because it's, it could, for example, be insecurity, like overcompensating for insecurity or something like that. If I can develop an understanding for that, then maybe I can find a way to communicate differently that will help them, right? So I could maybe, before I announce my own decision in your example, I could maybe say, what would you do? And I can let them speak and let them give their opinion on what they think would be the right thing to do. And then I can tell them what about their answer was great, like what good ideas they had, how that makes sense, and what are the things that they hadn't considered and that I can see because I have more experience. And then in that way, maybe, help them develop the perspective for it. I don't know if it would work in that specific situation, but like, what I'm trying to say is, look at empathetically, look at where are these people coming from? Why are they pushing like that?
I actually had something, if I can add, that I was thinking of as Julie was talking about this, and you kind of answered it, but I'll just add it anyway, was that does the violent communication increase when we feel less safe psychologically, or we just feel threatened, like we've got a boss or a leader or somebody who is consistently eroding the respect that I think is my due? So I'm going to compensate for that by pushing even harder.
I think so, yes. The more I feel on the defensive for whatever reason, the more likely I am to communicate violently, right? So, because, when we feel defensive, we fight, because that's one of the instincts, right? It's fight, flight, or freeze. And so some people have this fight instinct when they're on the defensive. But even the flight or the freeze instincts are not good, like especially in the workplace environment, but also in the family environment. You don't want that reaction, because then you're not resolving anything. So the idea behind nonviolent communication is that we don't push people into fight, flight, or freeze, but that we stay in a space where communication happens and can continue to happen.
Thank you. I'm just looking around if there are any other questions here. I think everyone's just got their thinking hats on and kind of I'm trying to digest the wealth that
kind of thing you need to absorb.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of information available online. So there's a whole 3-hour workshop recorded that Dr. Marshall Rosenberg gives on YouTube. So if you just look for Dr. Marshall Rosenberg and nonviolent communication on YouTube. It's like 3 hours of workshop that you can just watch for free, where you can understand the method from his own explanation. Then there's the book Getting to Yes with Myself by William Ury, that also really uses this, is built on the principle of nonviolent communication, but translates it very well, I think, into a more business context and negotiations context. And then of course there's the website cnbc.org, which is the Center for Nonviolent Communication. You have cnbc.org. And those are all resources if you want to delve in more into these things. And not getting to yes, but getting to yes with yourself. He wrote a first book called Getting to Yes, and then a second book called Getting to Yes with Yourself. And that's the one I'm referring to, the Getting to Yes with Yourself.
Carolyn, I have kind of an urgent question.
Yeah,
that
go ahead.
I wish we'd done a little bit sooner, but it's not too late, hopefully. Because I know that, you are big in the intercultural communication space and communication coaching, but I also know you have a huge background in ESL and therefore language teaching. And so can you make the bridge for us in this? Because this is very much in this like intercultural communication coaching. Can you bring it in with your experience into the language learning / teaching domain?
Yeah, of course. Well, I think that, it's very important to have some cultural awareness when we're doing language teaching for many reasons, because when we're language teaching, we often have a long conversations with people, right? Because we need them to speak. That's like a big part of teaching a language, right? Is you get them to speak. But if you don't have cultural awareness, sometimes you can get into very uncomfortable situations because maybe you ask an inappropriate question in their mind, or they ask an inappropriate question in your mind, so it's very important to have that kind of awareness and sensitivity for culture and be able to bridge that gap by going back to the 5 steps that I mentioned for the creating communication. And also, if you have that awareness, for example, of Hofstede's dimensions, that helps you understand why. Like some people will always call you madam or sir because of their culture, right? And some people will just talk to you like you're their brother or their sister, So these kind of things, that's like a high power distance or low power distance reaction, right? So these awarenesses can really help you to have much better communication with the people. That means you get better connection. If people feel safe, they learn more, right? Whenever people feel safe in a space, they can learn more. If you don't feel safe in a space, you're so busy with your fear reactions and your nervous system that your brain is not functioning as well. Yeah, if you're very relaxed and you're feeling safe, your brain functions much better and can absorb much more. So you want to create an environment of psychological safety, and you want them to feel that you have a connection. You as people have a connection, right? And that means you need to have, some sensitivity to potential cultural issues. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, no, that's good. Well, it reminds me that, I was finding that the steps quite relevant to things that you can integrate into language coaching as well. And when working with clients and working with learners and what they can take from this type of thing. For example, the imagery of go to the balcony. I love that in terms of mindfulness, right? For the learner. Like if someone is not understanding you, go to the balcony, right? Don't go to your defensive place. Don't go to your panic place. Go to the balcony instead and get some metacognition, get meta, what is happening in this moment, take a beat, and then and then assume a good intention. I really loved that bit. Yeah.
Yeah, like William Ury gives a great example of he was with some president. I can't remember which country the president was from, but he was in a mediation situation and he was talking to this president, and the president was just shouting at him. Like for 25 minutes, this president was just shouting abuse at him. And he said, you know, of course, he was getting more and more aggravated by this situation. And he felt like he should like give as good as he got, you know, like part of him really wanted to just give back, you know, in the same vein. But then he realized that, you know, he took this moment to go to the balcony, and he realized that if he's gonna respond in the same manner, they're not going anywhere. They're just spiraling downwards, 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 and it's just gonna end in a terrible situation. But if he could respond differently, he might be able to flip the conversation, you know? And so he made a response, I can't remember what it was now, but he made a response that made the president laugh and stop, you know? And so then he stopped, and then the whole atmosphere changed, and then they could have a productive conversation after that. So going to the balcony, yes, definitely very, very useful.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Gabriella, for that link.
I looked it up. I'm going to check it out after this.
There's actually also, if you don't want to get the book, again, there is Getting to Yes with Yourself. There's a talk at Google, 1 hour presentation by William Ury himself, where he presents the book in a talk at Google. It's free, again, freely available on YouTube. So that's another thing that you can check out if you're interested in this.
Wonderful. Yeah, I was just thinking how all this ties in with the basic principles of coaching. And absolutely. So zooming out, being able to look onto the situation as if you were not part of it, being objective, being future and positive oriented. So these all tie in very nicely. So I'm just kind of letting it all sink in and kind of move on with everything else that I have in my head. So very
no, I mean, that's something I think that unfortunately is not always taught in coaching trainings, you know, but I think it's one of the most important thing in coach training is that you realize when you're triggered, you know, that you understand when you're triggered and when it's personal, your personal stuff coming up in the session, which has nothing to do with the client or what the client just did. They just happened to use a word or, you know, push a button for you, but they didn't intend to do that, right? They weren't trying to annoy you. It's just something that you're super sensitive to, maybe. Yeah. So having that awareness of what are my triggers, what is my where's my sensitivity really high, will enable me to then go to the balcony, you know, and put this aside. Like, personal example. I used to have this thing about I used to have this kind of chip on my shoulder where I thought whenever somebody repeated something, I felt like they were telling me I was stupid, right? So it was I was super sensitive to anyone speaking slowly or repeating things, because I would immediately feel insulted and feel that they were implying that I was stupid, right? So it took like, I mean, this was when I was like 19, 20, you know, but like, you know, it took some building awareness around that to realize that most of the time people were not at all implying that I was stupid. They were thinking out loud, and they were repeating because they were trying to come to grips with their own thoughts about things, right? That had nothing to do with me at all. So yeah, I think that those kind of things are like things where we need to be aware.
Yeah, that's connected to personal histories and also biases that we're, you know, carrying with us, but need to leave at the front door, you know, when you enter a coaching space. And I think in a training space. Right, thank you. Now I'm looking at the time here, and I think we've gone overboard, but all of you just here, I can't see everyone, but it's just very nice that quite a lot of you are here. If there are any more questions, now's the time, because then I think, Carrie, we're going to be closing for today. And thank you, Carolyn, very much for a very, very, very interactive, highly relevant conversation. I think everyone should have this conversation with themselves and with their environment. So thank you very much for getting us thinking.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anything else? Yeah, I think people are dropping off now slowly. Yes. Thank you very, very much. I think we're really just digesting all the richness that you brought us. So thank you very, very much. Okay. And same time next month, We don't know the exact date yet, and do check out our new website, more news with our conference. Thank you very much, Carolyn, for being here, and thank you, Carrie, for inviting Carolyn. So yeah. Thank you very much, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.